It is 2 p.m. Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Mountain Time, 4 p.m. Central Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Western European Time, 10 p.m. Central European Time, 11 p.m. Eastern European Time, midnight Southern Eastern European Time, and we are live on YouTube. 3 minutes late, I know. I'm too ambitious with all the stuff I do, which makes me late. I'm sorry about that. But thank you all for being here, and God bless the people in the chat. I might wait a little for more people to show up. I'll have a look at the chat to see what it looks like. Actually, there are already 9 people in the chat, which is great. Uh, well, let me tell you that I really appreciate your participation and your support. Without you, I would not be able to do this. As you know, I am traveling to Gdansk, Poland on Thursday, so I will not live stream again until Saturday. On Thursday evening, I assume that I am having dinner out on town in Gdansk with my Norwegian friends, and maybe with some Polish friends too, who knows. I will produce a few videos too this week though, so look out for that, and look out for my live stream from my Gdansk hotel room on Saturday, which will be on the usual time, the time that translates to 10 p.m. Central European Time. I know that you Americans are now in summertime, so that means that and the super chat, just click on the little dollar sign below the chat. You can also support me through PayPal and Patreon or through buying some of my merchandise. People are asking for merchandise with either my face or the Swedish flag, and hopefully I can look into creating something like that next week. This week is really full of activities. You find the links to PayPal, Patreon, and my merchandise in the information under this video. All super chats will be read out loud in the live stream. All right, so now we are 17 people in the live stream. Uh, so thank you all for being here, and let's take a look at today's stories. My Swedish favorite journalist Ulf Nilson died on March 10th, aged 84. I did not know him personally, and I have never met him, but I remember him from my childhood. When I first started moving to the right in my early teens, I was reading his columns in the Swedish newspaper Expressen. Some of these columns would without doubt be unprintable in the Swedish mainstream media today. For some years, Ulf Nilson was a correspondent in the United States. I remember him mentioning that in one of his books, where he also pointed out how he came to embrace American capitalism during his years in the United States. Maybe he was red pilled by his years in America. I don't know, but I know that the love he felt for America was similar to my experience after 2 visits in the American Midwest. Ulf Nilsson wrote a book called Sverige, sluten anstalt, which could roughly be translated as Sweden, secluded institution. That book is available as a PDF, and I intend to read it. Maybe I will do some kind of review on that book later. In 2005, Ulf Nilsson wrote a column in Expressen, in which column he called Islam, quote, a dangerous religion, end quote. I think Ulf Nilsson had a contract that made sure that he was allowed to write columns, because in 2005, that was really not politically correct in Sweden, and not the kind of material that Expressen would publish otherwise. So, a great journalist, columnist, and author has left us. May he rest in peace. Uh, and I also heard that Rex Tillerson is leaving office. I saw that. Uh, well, I don't know the reason for that, but I hope the US gets a good foreign secretary. We need to talk about the United Kingdom again. In my latest live stream, I mentioned that Martin Sellner, leader of the Identitarian movement, and his American girlfriend, the conservative commentator Brittany Pettibone, were detained when they tried to enter the UK last week. Their crime? Sellner intended to hold a speech in Speaker's Corner about free speech and Islam, and Pettibone was going to interview Tommy Robinson. They were detained and sent back to Austria. Eventually, Tommy Robinson traveled to Austria to interview Sellner and Pettibone. Then Lauren Southern was stopped from entering the UK. She was stopped in Cannes and banned from the UK. I think for life, but I don't know. Her crime? Racism. And what was that racism? As far as I know, The reason is that she had been in Luton claiming that, quote, Allah is a gay god, close quote. Apparently, it is racism in the UK to mock Allah and or Islam. When did Allah become a race? So now there are 20 people in here already. I think that's wonderful. I see a lot of well-known faces and names here, and I'm very happy to see you here. So thank you all for being here, and I appreciate your support and your participation very much. And I'll tell you this, and then I'll keep quiet about it for a while. Just remember that if you want to be guaranteed that I read out your message, unless you write something that is outright racist, anti-Semitic, or crazy, you can always send a super chat. I will read out some other messages from the chat too and respond to questions like I have been doing since I started with these live streams. And a big thank you to everyone who have helped me to make these live streams interesting so far, and thanks to everyone who have supported my work so far. So, last story for the beginning of this live stream is the Nordic welfare states, or maybe we should say welfare states in general. Daily Wire recently interviewed the Swedish free market author Johan Norberg on the destructive nature of socialism. In that interview, Norberg talks about the rise and fall of Sweden and how Sweden rose again in the 1990s. I disagree with Norberg when it comes to cultural issues, open borders issues, and his idea that migration is always beneficial, but when it comes to free market economics, we usually agree. I know that Norberg have talked several times about how capitalism made Sweden rich, together with some luck after World War II, one might add, but really, Sweden's record growth from the late 1800s until about 1970 was because of free market economics. In 1960, Sweden and the United States had roughly the same tax burden. It was after Olof Palme became prime minister and the Social Democrats actually tried to impose socialism on Sweden that the country went downhill. During the 1990s, Sweden had some free market reforms and the economy improved again. Most of these reforms were under the Social Democrats, who introduced these reforms out of necessity rather than anything else. They didn't really want to, but they had to. However, since the introduction of open border policies, and this is where I and Norberg would disagree strongly, I believe, Sweden is going downhill again. I guess this is what makes me a conservative and Norberg a left libertarian. He doesn't realize the importance of culture and group dynamics, but on economical issues, he is pretty much right. And by the way, speaking of the welfare state, don't forget how Britain was going down the drain until Margaret Thatcher came into power and saved the UK from socialism. As Margaret Thatcher said, quote, "The problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money," close quote. Something seen in extreme cases like Venezuela, but also in the Nordic welfare states. And by the way, in California, I believe. For instance, Sweden has the second longest health lines in Europe, second only to Albania, at least according to numbers from 2016. So don't try this at home and roll back the welfare state, well, the ones you already have. It doesn't do anyone any good except for some politicians and bureaucrats. For the rest, it just fuels a dependency culture, which is extremely harmful to functioning families and functioning societies. You can see this in large parts, even in the American society, but I have also seen it among ethnic Swedes and Norwegians. It's more of a class issue in Scandinavia, I guess, but I have seen it not only in America, I have seen it in Scandinavia too, and it's really harmful. It doesn't help anyone, and you're not being nice to the people you're trying to help. So, thank you all for being here, and I'll have a look at the chat because to see what's going on here. 28 people in here, that's great. Gavin R says another Muslim grooming gang exposed in Telford and the BBC are ignoring it. I saw something about that and I might be able to cover some of these stories next time. I don't know because I always end up having a lot of stories to cover, so I always have to pick and choose. William Marshall says let's see. Speaker's Corner this Sunday with Tommy Robinson. It should be interesting if it's allowed to go ahead. I will try to watch that. I mean, I won't be in London on Sunday. I'll still be in Poland on Sunday. I'm leaving Poland on Monday, but maybe I can follow it online if I'm not busy doing something else then. Otherwise, I'll watch it after. Lori P says, I'm in Ohio, southeastern, about 30 miles from the Kentucky border. It wasn't supposed to snow today. Odd. So it's snowing in Ohio. Interesting. Uh, I kind of have a relationship to Ohio. Maybe I'll tell you more about that some other time. Let's see. Dogbert52 says, as they are ignoring Jeremy Corbyn's participation in a jihadi Facebook group. That's very interesting. Well, I should look into that because, well, I guess I'm not really surprised, although it's interesting because the left has this tendency to ally with radical Muslims. I guess because they have a common enemy, which happens to be, well, the Western civilization, really. Although the left, as I have said again, and I will say it 1,000 times more, or maybe 10,000 times more, the left should study the modern history of Iran. The Iranian left and the Muslims teamed up to depose the Shah. They deposed the Shah, and then the Muslims turned on the left and hanged them. Where is the Iranian left today? They live in California and in Sweden. They don't live in Iran. Maybe some people are still underground in Iran. Fine. But basically, they left or they were killed. And how can I put it? Islamophile Christians, as we have a lot of them in Scandinavia, they should study Lebanon and what happened to them. Lisa Leto says, there are two people I would like to see you interview. Please let me know who these people are, Lisa Leto. And I am working on some interviews. I might interview some people in Poland, but I'm working on maybe getting an interview or two done in London in April. I'm not really sure if I should give out too much information about my London visit before I'm actually there, given all the things that have been going on in Britain lately. Although I think I'm still small enough to fly under the radar, but I don't know for how long. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if some people are actually watching me by now. A. Pinochet says, my friends, Greek Orthodox Society will be filming the speech at Speaker's Corner. Pray for their safety, please. Absolutely. We need to pray for the safety of your friends who will film that speech. I suppose that the Antifa crowd or some other nasty people will show up. Lisa Leto says, Brian of London from Israel and Brit girl in the UK. I don't know who these people are, but they are probably interesting. So I'd like to meet them. Tyrant Tueteli says, I have a question for you. What is your take on government assistance and how does it work in your part of the world? Is it similar to the system in the United States? Actually, I'm not really sure in detail how that system works in the United States. I think government assistance is what I might call welfare. And the way it works in Scandinavia, if I've understood it correctly, is that if you don't have any other support, if you don't have a job, if you don't have unemployment benefits or disability benefits or any other kind of benefits, welfare or government assistance is sort of the last line. That's where you show up if you're not receiving money from any other source. And I think you're able to go on government assistance more or less indefinitely in Sweden and Norway. I don't know about Denmark or Finland, but I think you can do that. Although they will try to, or I think they will try to make you find a job. But I think you can make it into a living. Not a very nice living, but still, I think you can do that as a living in Scandinavia. And I think that at least in part of the United States, you can do that too. I mean, it's not a good thing, but I think that's a possibility. I'm not sure if that was what you wanted to know, but Well, just ask me a more specific question in case my response seems really off. Uh, let's see. CL Rhines EU says, see if I'm able to translate this. Uh, he says something about his latest video being commented and liked and getting 2 more subscriptions. My German is a little rusty, CL Rhines. I'm sorry. I studied German in the, I guess you would say, in senior high, and that would be, or actually in German it would be gymnasium, because that's what it is in Swedish. So I know some German, but it's really rusty. So I'm not sure what you said there. I have an idea. Uh, Paulo Forever 2 says God has been replaced by the states in many parts of the West. What do you think? I think that's correct. And I think sort of the state sanctioned secularism that we have in Scandinavia, in France, in many different Western countries, it doesn't stand a chance against against Islam. And that's actually one reason. First of all, we need to defend Western civilization, but we also need to understand what we are defending. What is Western civilization? And Western civilization is basically Christianity. Western civilization is Jewish in its roots and Christian in its nature. So, and to have a Judeo Christian Western civilization, we need actual believing Christians. Everyone doesn't have to be a Christian, but we need Christians to uphold this civilization because that's the only thing that can stand against Islam. You could argue that maybe hardline Marxism could do that too, but we don't want hardline Marxism, do we? Uh, Leonardo Russo says, Jesus, peace to you and good evening to all. Well, the peace of Jesus Christ to you too, Leonardo Russo, and good evening to you too. Or good afternoon, depending on which part of the world you're in. I think it's afternoon in North America and evening in Europe, or well, depending on where in Europe you are, it's evening to early night. Dogbert52 says God, civilization, country, family, couple bond, and finally the morals of the individual. Yes, I agree. Actually, there is a point that could be made about the replacement of God with the state or with government. Swedes are sometimes described as being state individualists or government individualists. And this happened sometime around 1970. As I said, Sweden had record growth for about 100 years, but Sweden started going downhill when the left-wing radical Olof Palme, who by the way came from an upper-class family and who had read himself into socialism and who had all these ideas. He was more than anything else an ideological person, uh, and he tried to actually impose socialism in Sweden. So one of the things they tried to do was that they tried to make sure that wives should no longer be dependent upon their husbands, children should no longer be dependent upon their parents, and old people should no longer be dependent on their adult children. And of course, if you had a problem, you shouldn't solve it within the neighborhood. You shouldn't go to your neighbors. He kind of he really killed off the civil society in Sweden. If someone talks about the civil society in Sweden today, and the same goes for Norway, by the way, the part of civil society that we still have isn't really the civil society anymore because it's all taxpayer funded and they are following the whims of government. This includes the churches, sadly. The mainstream churches all do. Uh, uh, Before I go on with this rant, I don't want to hear about the Kalergi plan, and that's all I have to say about that. So anyway, so what happened was, of course, uh, because they made all these systems individual. I mean, for one thing, couples in Sweden used to be taxed together. I mean, married couples, of course, because marriage was the norm. Remember, until the 1970s, marriage was the norm, and divorces were rare until the 1970s, and that, I guess, was an effect of the policies. Okay, I will respond to this by Gent Gika, but I won't go into any further discussion on the topic because I have done so before, and I'm basically tired of it. So Gent Gika says, why? I assume the comment is why I don't want to hear about the Kalergi plan, because it's an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. I don't want to hear about it. Jews and Zionism is not a problem for the West. Political correctness and Islam is. There are some Jews who are very politically correct and who are doing bad stuff. It's not because they are Jews, it's because they are left wing. Conservative Jews are usually very good. Liberal Jews might not have very good opinions. That goes for liberal non Jews too. So I don't want to hear about it. If you want to discuss that, do it somewhere else. So, anyway, what happened then with the Swedes was you had an explosion of divorces. If you had a problem, you shouldn't turn to your husband or your wife for that matter. You shouldn't turn to your parents. Old people shouldn't turn to their adult children. No, you go to the government. So they really harmed Swedish society, and you had an explosion of divorces. You had an explosion of out of wedlock births. The marriage rate went down. The norm in Sweden today is to not get married. The norm in Sweden today is to live with a partner without being married. Around, but they might want children. If you can find it, you should look up. There's a movie called The Swedish Theory of Love. They showed it on Swedish TV once, but then they didn't show it again. I guess they realized their mistake. I hope you can hear me right now. It seems like the connection is a little shaky. I hope you could hear me. They also showed it on Norwegian TV once, and then I guess they realized their mistake, and it's been very difficult to find it on YouTube. I was able to find it texted in Slovakian or something like that some time ago. I'm not sure if it's still there. I might look for it later. Well, I didn't know I was going to talk about this today, but well, it kind of goes with the welfare state. And of course, you also have the decline in traditional religion, the decline in faith. All of this is kind of connected. So really, because socialism is sort of a competing faith system to faith, really, or I mean to Christianity in this case. Although, of course, socialism doesn't really have anything to offer you except some kind of victimhood mentality. This idea of instead of being grateful, you have your rights that you have to fight for, and these rights are on other people's expense. Well, I'm kind of getting off the rails here. Anyway, Michael St. George says, I liked your comment about Jews. You are right. Thank you very much. And Carol Worth says, same in the US, unfortunately. I have seen some of that in the US too, although I think the US have not gone as far as Sweden, but I have seen that has been going on all over the West. Sweden just happened to be the most extreme case. It's even worse than Norway, because in Norway, although Norway has high taxes, a lot of socialism going on, but they still have more rural communities. And in rural communities, people are naturally more conservative than in larger cities, because in rural communities, you still depend on each other. Even if you get welfare from the state and whatnot, the government can't solve all your problems. It can't do that in cities either, but in cities, it's easier to get around because of, well, communications are easier in the city. Out on the countryside, there are some things that government just can't solve. So you will have to depend on your neighbors in a different way, and that will make people naturally more conservative. Plus, actually, I think it's easier to live in a city and sort of refuse to work than doing that out on the countryside, because on the countryside your neighbors will look funnily at you, and they might try to help you, but they will also tell you that you have to get your act together. Archie Demble says that is happening in more liberal society. I agree. Let's see. There's a lot of comments coming in right now. I'm happy about that. There are 35 people in here. Thank you all for being here. Uh, John Jake says, what are your views on the US border wall? Oh, I want the wall to be built. And the way Sweden is going right now, I am arguing for the Norwegians to build a wall too. And it sounds like a joke, but the way Sweden is going, first of all, I have been saying for years now, if Sweden doesn't get their act together, there is an agreement between the Nordic countries, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, and Iceland, and that agreement has been there since the 1950s. The agreement says that if you are a citizen of any of these countries, you can freely move and work in all of the other countries without a work permit. You don't need a permit to move and to work. And basically, that has been a good and pretty fun. It's worked pretty well because it hasn't been that difficult for Finns to assimilate in Sweden, Swedes to assimilate in Norway, and so on. But the way Sweden is going now, and with a growing Islamic population, Sweden is moving towards a state of a failed state. Sweden is moving towards a civil war. I'm not joking. And that might happen in other countries in Western Europe too. It might happen in France. It might happen in the UK. I don't know about Germany. It could happen there too. So my point is, since Sweden hasn't got their act together, I'm now telling people here in Norway, Sweden should be kicked out of the Nordic agreement and build a wall. Or before you do that, tell Sweden that everyone traveling from Sweden, unless they hold a Nordic passport that is not Swedish but Danish or Finnish or Icelandic, they can come. The rest will have to have a visa. They have to be vetted because we don't know what kind of people are traveling to and from Sweden. Really. And Sweden is the greatest threat to its neighbors right now. I mean, people talk about Russia, and I'm not that fond of Putin, but I don't consider Russia to be the big threat here. I consider Sweden to be a threat against its neighbor. Lori P says, Sweden-Denmark wall, question mark. Well, Sweden and Denmark, the border is kind of in the sea, so that might be difficult. There is a bridge from the south of Sweden to Denmark, so that could be discussed. Lori P says walls are biblical. Actually, yes, I haven't thought about that, but yeah, they are. Archie Demble says, what if you are not from Nordic country? For instance, if you're from Poland and you move to Norway, I think you need some kind of well, I mean, since you're an EU citizen, you will get a work permit. I think what you need a permit to live in Norway, and you get that if you can show that you have a Norwegian employer or something like that. I think so. I'm not really sure, and I don't have a problem with that because the way I see it, in general, Polish people in Norway or in Denmark or in the UK, while they might compete with the domestic workforce, but in general, they are not a big problem for the host countries, and they are not trying to institute Sharia on the countries. We don't see gang rapes performed by Poles towards Norwegian girls. Nothing like that is going on. So I don't see a problem with that. So I don't really want to change anything there right now. And I think we could have deals about free migration or semi-free migration between certain countries without the EU. We don't need the EU for that. Uh, let's see. Mr. Super 101 says Germany is busing AFA to Eastern Europe to disrupt meetings and demonstrations. That wouldn't surprise me too much, actually. Archie Demble says, do you really think that Poland will invade Sweden? No, I don't think so. I hope I didn't come out as thinking something like that. I don't think that's going to happen. But Poland also needs to think about how to relate to Sweden and to Germany. Paulo Forever 2 says, Have you noticed that until the 1980s, nobody talked about homosexual marriages? It wasn't even an issue for the left. Now, if you're against homosexual marriages, you're a hater. Amazing this change. I can't remember hearing anything about that until the 1990s, actually. Uh, and I think, well, that's the nature of progressivism. If you open up for progressive policies, you get flooded by it. I'm not sure how to put it any other way, but you open up for a little, it's like a crack in a wall. If you have a wall to keep the flood away, but once it starts cracks and you get a little of it going through, suddenly you will get flooded by all sorts of madness. So that's sort of how I view progressivism, progressive policies, whatever it might be. It could be gay marriages, it could be this idea that there are no biological sexes, that it's all genders and these genders are fluid or it's just a social construct and so on. By which, by the way, I heard that Steven Crowder asked some people that if gender is just a social construct, why do you need hormone treatment or operations, which is a great point, by the way. Uh, Gavin Rogerson says, such a shame. Sweden was the heaven of Europe. Yes, Sweden, well, I mean, post World War II, Sweden really was. Uh, Alleluia says Poland need wall on Polish-German border. Yeah, I think you do. Uh, William Marshall says UK need a wall around London. I see that Mantis JK is not very fond of Trump. Well, I'll allow that. I allow some disagreements because, well, as I think you know, I'm a big Trump fan. Or if you don't know already, you will find out that by the ending part of this live stream, which will be in roughly 45 to 50 minutes. I'm trying to keep it to around 80 till 90 minutes. Archie Demble says, actually, all these values are not part of Poland. I might have missed something here. I'm not sure which values you're talking about right now, Archie. I think Poland. I mean, I might be surprised when I come to Poland on Thursday, but my impression is that Poland is pretty deeply rooted in Western civilization, and I mean, for the times when Poland was communist, it wasn't really the Poles who were communist. They were occupied by a communist entity, and the Polish government happened to be, well, they might have been Poles, but they were appointed by Moscow. Leonardo Russo says all these problems we're facing in the West were the results of leaving Christ. I agree. Uh, and what it really is the left fought Christianity fiercely, and now we are reaping, well, sort of the benefits or the disbenefits of this. Gavin Rogerson says, gotta go to work. Stay safe all. Goodbye. Okay, stay safe you too and goodbye. Archie Demble says, in Sweden and Germany. Okay, then I get you. Then, well, in that case, I think we agree. And I think I will enjoy Poland. I might stay off some hot button issues because I don't want to make a fuss with Polish people I meet. I mean, just randomly. I intend to go out and have a nice dinner on Thursday evening. Let's see. Tyrant Watelli says, Swede, does gentrification exist in Scandinavia or is this just in the US? Oh, it exists. It exists in, well, yes, you could say gentrification has happened to parts of Stockholm, for instance, and to parts of Oslo. In Stockholm, my maternal grandmother grew up in a working class area called Södermalm. It used to be a working class area. Her father worked at a bakery. They moved eventually, and he started his own business. But that's another story. But anyway, when she grew up there in the 30s and early 40s, that was a working class area, and it stayed that way for a few decades. But eventually, with the rising population in Stockholm, a lot of people were trying to move there. And Södermalm is pretty close to downtown Stockholm. By now, I guess it is downtown Stockholm. So the middle class to upper middle class moved in and they outpriced the working class. That's kind of what happened. Plus, in Sweden, you have rent control and stuff like that, and that really didn't help. Uh, let's see. And similar things has happened in parts of Oslo and Copenhagen. Carol Worth says, "Keep losing you, Jay." I'm sorry about that, Carol Worth. I don't know why that's happening right now. Let me assure you that I'm very happy to have you in the live stream and or in the chat, and I'd like to keep you in here. So I don't know what's going on with that. Mr. Super 101 says no, only ghettoification. Well, that happens too. You have gentrification on one side and ghettoification on the other side. And I know that a lot of Swedes who can't afford to be part of this gentrification and who don't want to be part of the ghettoification are leaving the cities and moving out on the countryside, which has worked historically. But the problem now with Sweden is that migrants are not only coming to the larger cities, although they usually want to go to Stockholm or Malmö, but a lot of them also end up in the countryside because when you seek asylum in Sweden, the government sends you to one place or the other, and they'll say, "Here is where you're supposed to be," and so you're getting so now this is happening all over the country. Uh, oh, thank Lisa Letto just sent me a super chat. Thank you. Well, thank you for your generosity. And she says, Brit Girl and Brian of London. Okay, I will Google these people and see what I can find and try to connect with them. Uh, I have one or two people in London that I might be able to meet with. I'm working out the details of that. Right now, I don't really have anyone in Gdansk apart from the other people on the conference, and I hope that some of them will be willing to do an interview or two. I mean, I assume there is at least one or two of them that will do that, but we'll see. Anyway, I will do some of my regular videos, and I will live stream from Poland on Saturday. I mean, I have checked out my hotel, and it's got Wi-Fi, so it should work. I hope their Wi-Fi will be better than the one I have here. We'll see. And I got a super chat from Mantis JK. Thank you for your generosity. It looks like my hair isn't really in order. Well, A. Pinochet says Brian of London is very good. Okay, I'll make sure to look into him and to Brit Girl. See what these people are about. Archie Demble says you were last time in Poland in 1997. It is everything changed. Uh, let's see. Uh, prepared to the cultural shock. Uh, yeah, I know. I haven't been in Poland for over 2 decades, so we'll see what I say. Oh, Mantis JK says nice sideburns though. Well, this is your last chance to see them because I'm going to the hairdresser tomorrow, and I'll tell him to remove these two. I mean, that's my plan at least, but I have a long to-do list for tomorrow too. So worst case scenario, I'll go to the hairdresser on Thursday, and on Thursday I'm also flying out to Gdansk. So we'll see. I also have a bunch of articles to write. I wrote two today, one for a Swedish blog, where I sometimes guest blog, and one for a Norwegian alternative media site called reset.no. If you can read Norwegian, you could look them up. But I haven't published it yet. They told me they would though. So we'll see. Carol Worth says we'll get you a beanie like Tim's. Oh wow, that's not really my style. Uh, although I could get a MAGA hat, but I'm not really into that style. But if I would wear one, I would wear that one. William Marshall says Happy New Haircut tomorrow. Yeah, thank you. It will be a lot shorter, so we'll see. Or that's my plan at least. Okay. So Well, when I sort of run out of material, I usually ask questions. I'll ask you something else today than I because most of the people in here are well have been here for have been here before. Uh, so I'll ask you. Okay, this is kind of a hot button question, so I could get all sorts of responses, I guess. But okay, what do you think is the most important issue in your country or in the West or the world in general? I mean, I think everyone in here is from the Western world, but I could be wrong. I mean, there might there might be people in who are not writing in the chat too, and they could be from wherever, I suppose. William Marshall says, "Talk a little about your book, please." And Tyrone Tuitelli says, "Swedes, keep up the good work, brother." Okay, I will try to keep that up. And William Marshall, I'm writing on a book that I'm calling Understanding Sweden. If I can't figure out a better title, I'm going with that one. Right now, I have about 20,000 words. It's a collection of articles where I explain different aspects of Swedish mentality, Swedish culture, Swedish history, and some of these, of course, they are kind of mixed together with each other. And what I'm trying to do is to explain why Sweden turned out the way it did, why why Swedes are why Swedes reason the way they do, and to understand this, I go through Swedish history, Swedish psychology, well, the things that influence Swedish culture, and my plan is to get up to 45,000 or so words. So I assume I'll have to keep on writing for another 6 months or so. William Marshall says, "I will buy and promote." Thank you very much. Uh, let's see. There was something here from Leonardo Russo. Leonardo Russo says, "Sir, I sent a message to your email about government moving out of Sweden. Yes, sir, I saw your message and I've sent you a response. So let's just keep that communication line open and see how to plan this out. But I'm very happy about to hear about your work. So yeah, just let's just take it on the emails and see how to plan this all out. Uh, let's see. Michael St. George says, "Do you think that the majority of the citizens of Sweden are ready to turn against the immigrants and get a government to move them out?" Well, I one way I wish they were, the way I think you mean at least, but I'd say, and this is one thing that I am addressing in what I'm writing, Swedes are very conformist. Swedes are very afraid to stand out, to speak out, unless they have support of the crowd. Individualism, real individualism, not state individualism, is very rare in Sweden. Roughly 80% of Swedes think the same thing all the time. So when Swedes change their mind, they change their mind collectively. And if you don't agree, you shut up about it. Because if you speak out, you might very well lose your job. You might end up in court. That's been more common recently. It wasn't that common before, but it's getting more common. You sort of turn into a pariah or something like that. Uh, so, and the problem with this is, of course, that because of this conformist mindset, the price of speaking up is getting heavier, and that, or well, it's harder to speak up. So people like me becomes a very rare occasion. Sometimes it feels like I know all the people speaking up about Sweden. Some of them, like me, live abroad. Uh, so I'm not that hopeful when it comes to Sweden. I wish I were, but I'm not. But hopefully I'm wrong. The way it is right now, I use Sweden as a warning example. If Sweden turns around, I will use Sweden as a good example. But as long as it doesn't, I'll use it as a warning example. Lady Anja too says, any comment on the news article about older Swedish women paying and keeping immigrants as sex toys? Haven't seen any recent articles on that, but I know that before at least there has been some, well, middle-aged to older Swedish women who have kept Afghan migrants in their homes, and these pretending to be children, but maybe they have been in their 20s or late 20s. And I think there's been a lot of stuff going on there that really wasn't good at all, including, well, that they've kept them as partners, I guess. Uh, let's see. Paulo Forever 2 says, what do you think about the connection between economical and political liberties? When there was less state in the Western economies some decades ago, there were also more political liberties. I think they're absolutely connected. Um, I mean, in short, yeah, I think there's an obvious connection here. And I think if you have a strong culture, you don't need you can have a much freer society under a stronger culture, because a strong culture will also make sure that you don't step out of the lines that you shouldn't step out of. I mean, for instance, you don't need to ban immorality per se, because in a Christian civilization, most people will make sure to get married and have their children within marriage and stay together and have a stable home for children. But once you attack Christianity the way it has been attacked in the West, you will, and you combine this with generous welfare states, you will see a growth in broken families, which isn't helping anyone. Uh, Archie Demble says, I guess for me to stay with Polish historical, and I guess that the rest of Europe still are notice us as the country who got a rich history we got and how much we are not so important. I think Poland is very important right now, for the example Poland sets for other countries. And the things I've been hearing now is that there is some kind of revolt towards Brussels planned between different countries in Central Europe. I'm not sure about what's going on with that, so we'll see. Carol Worth says, so true, Jay. I lost a good friend when I tried to tell her the truth a year ago. Well, I know that happens a lot. I'm sad to hear that. That's the way it is. Uh, Leonardo Russo says, by the way, unfortunately, I must go. Tomorrow I have things to do. Okay, Leonardo, have a nice evening. Uh, Leonardo Russo says, God bless, guys, and I wish you a very blessed night. Well, I wish you a very blessed night too. Lady Anya too says, how can Swedish people defend rapists, illegals, and shame the victims, including the victims themselves? I think most people in Sweden wouldn't defend rapists in their own homes. Or, I mean, if you would ask them between eye to eye, they wouldn't defend this. But there is this narrative in Sweden that the people, the guys doing these rapes, are victims too, as they said in Swedish TV a few days ago about a gang rape in, I think it was in Malmö. Uh, a bunch of guys, I'm not sure how many, was there 7 of them? There was a lot of them who gang raped a woman, or I mean, for 10 hours, and it's really horrible. And what they were focusing on Swedish TV yesterday was only that what these young men are victims too. That's all they were talking about. I saw it and it was disgusting. Today they sort of retracted a little on that and said, "Well, no, we didn't want to. We of course we didn't mean that." But I guess the reason they said that was because all of the people in Sweden who were really upset about this and shared this on social media. So, well, things like that, I don't think Swedes really accept that. But as I said, it's very difficult for Swedes to well to stand up to go against the crowd, or even to go against what they think is the crowd, because I think there is a perception in Sweden that 80% has these ideas, but I don't think that's really 80%, because as I have said before, we don't need the majority. We need critical mass. That's true for Sweden, that's true for the United States, That's true for any country because most people are followers. I think most people in here are not of the followers kind because then you wouldn't be here. But in general, most people are followers, and that means if 10% of the population speaks up about something, they will be a majority of the people speaking up, and followers will start following them. And critical mass, I mean, you could Google it. It's a theory, and I think it seems to be pretty accurate. To give you an example, most Germans during the Third Reich were not active Nazis; they were just followers. And well, Sweden has something like 10% Muslims by now. The number is a little isn't really known because there are no statistics on it, but it could be 8 to 10% of the population. So they are actually reaching critical mass. Although not everyone are that active, but once you get that active critical mass, you want to make sure you have the right critical mass because if you get the wrong one, it will be really really bad. Tyron Twittell says a Swede speaks, not a follower, but a follower to this channel. I'm happy about. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Thank you very much. Uh, and I'm getting closer to 4,000, and I'm looking forward to that. And maybe live streaming from Poland and from the UK will help my numbers too. And I do care about my numbers, actually, yes. But the reason I do these live streams is, well, to get the interaction with the audience. Archie Demble says every country has need a critical mass. Yes, you're right. Every country needs a critical mass. And I mean, what happened in Poland back in the early 1980s was that Poland suddenly got some kind of critical mass. I think so, at least. That said that we've had enough of this. And I think when Pope John Paul II visited Poland and he told the Poles they didn't have to be afraid because God was on their side, he said something like that. And I mean, I'm not a Roman Catholic, but I have very high respect for Pope John Paul II. Not so much respect for Pope Francis, but John Paul II, he helped bring down world communism. And I'm very happy about that. Of course, Ronald Reagan helped out too, Margaret Thatcher helped out too, but I think when it comes to Poland, Pope John Paul was very important, and that he told the Poles they didn't have to be afraid. Let's see. Uh, A. Pinochet says, we're attempting to break away from the western side of the mountains. Check it out if you get a chance. I'm not sure who you're saying this to or what you mean by that, but well, that sounds good. Tyron Tueteli says, I'm recommending a lot of my friends and family to this channel. They're stuck on legacy media and it's been a long time. Uh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that a lot. Uh, Carol Worth says, me too, Jay. Okay, good, good. Thank you. Uh, Lady Anya too says, how are you going to survive what is happening in your country? Look at what idiocy the UK has pulled in the last few days. Well, I guess I'm a Swedish dissident living in Norway, and Norway is following the same direction. But as I think I have mentioned before in this channel, I am looking to relocate to the US, and I will of course do everything legally. So that's fine. I can tell you here because I'm not going to break any laws. I will apply for a US visa tomorrow, so you can pray for that for that process and for everything that needs to be done in relationship to that. But I intend to send my application tomorrow, and then we'll just see what happens. Lori P says, I follow Jesus, Yeshua, Yehoshua. It's the only kind of follower I want to be. Well, I agree with you on that. I mean, sure, I can follow a political leader to some extent, but Jesus is the only one I want to have as Lord in my life. Let's put it that way. Paleo Bushman says, Swede speaks. You need to set up a channel on BitChute in case you ever get banned from YouTube. You're right. I have thought about that. I have a channel on minds.com. That's kind of Well, I put a lot of my stuff on Minds too. Uh, well, in case this channel gets banned from YouTube, I hope it won't. But well, it's a possibility, and I should look into BitChute too, of course. Uh, Paulo Forever 2 says, according to you, how much of a percentage do Muslims need in a European country to make it Islamic? I think, okay, I'll make an educated guess here. Once we reach something like 20 or 30%, they might start Islamize the country for real. I mean, if you look at the Iberian Peninsula, a majority of the population were not Muslims. I think Muslims were maybe 30% of the population when the Iberian Peninsula had Muslim rule. Most people were Christians and Jews, so you don't really need the majority there either. But so so we really need to think about it. And if you look at look at the UK or look at Sweden, where you now have separate times in bathhouses for men and women in some places, things like that. And Sweden has maybe 10% Muslims. Lady Anya too says, good for you, Swede. I would be overjoyed to call you a fellow American. I would be overjoyed too. A. Pinochet says, David Horowitz has a great chart showing how population levels, Muslim, change countries. Front page magazine. Yeah, that's very interesting. I should look into that. Archie Demble says, today Europe started to change from the left narrative to right to ban left stupidity. I'm not really sure what you're trying to say here, but part of Europe is still in a left-wing narrative. Other parts are more to the right, and I think, ironically enough, it's the countries that actually experienced and survived communism that are more to the right today in Europe. And I'm getting comments on some of my videos that Poland has a socialist government too. I don't know about all the policies of the Polish government, so I can't really comment too much on that. But I think when it comes to cultural issues, countries like Poland and Hungary, Czechia, and now Austria, and maybe soon Italy, are more right. I mean, are being more right than the governments in Western Europe. But of course, there is no such thing as a perfect government. And Susie Cat says no, it's nationalistic. Well, I think Poland has many nationalist policies, and I can't really comment too much on the Polish government because I haven't followed Polish internal policies that much. But I have followed this, well, the conflict between Poland and EU and things like that. Carol Worth says Philippians chapter 1 verse 6. I'll look that one up. Let's see. Moment. My computer is a little slow now. I think I have too many windows open at the same time. Okay, let's see. Bible Gateway. All right. Philippians, let's see. New Testament. Philippians 1. All right. Verse 6 says, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Oh, yes, absolutely. I can't argue with the Bible, and well, thank you very much. Archie Demble says, I'm in Austria and Italy. Its latest election. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't really know what's going on in Italy right now, but it looks like Austria is going the right way, and we'll have to see which kind of government they are getting in Italy. A. Pinochet says Poland is nationalist, but just their stance on immigration will save them, even if they went socialist. Yes, for the time being, that will save them. Of course, if they would adopt crazy Marxist policies, that would not be good for them for other reasons. But I don't think they're going to go full Marxist. I think they'll learn their lesson when it comes to that. Lady Anya too says, do you think there will be war in Sweden's future? Well, what's going on in Sweden already is it's an asymmetric, low-intensity war, which means only one of the sides are really fighting this war, and the other side pretends it's not going on. But I think it is going on, and I think it will get worse. Maybe it has to get worse before it gets better. I don't know. Tyrant Tueteli says, have a good night all. I don't know what it takes to make people in Sweden wake up and see what's going on. I think that as long as a large part of the Swedish population lives in relatively safe areas, they will lock their eyes and lock their ears and pretend nothing is going on. But when it starts hitting the middle class too, not only the working class, things might change. We'll see. And I don't want a war. I want things to be worked out peacefully. But I'm saying that doesn't seem to be happening because 7 of the 8 parties in parliament are still more or less pretending nothing is going on, and they want to they want more censorship in Sweden. I mean, recently the moderate coalition party, Sweden's pseudo-conservative party, said that they are going to vote for the proposed changes of the Swedish constitution. So they're really just pseudo-conservative now. And it's horrible. So this is why I'm saying the Sweden Democrats needs their own majority. That's the only thing that can stop this censorship, and it would do some good to the immigration policies too. Susie Katz says the socialists are cheating at elections. Yeah, I think that's been known to happen in Sweden too. I think there was, at least at local level, that in some places they just threw away the election cards for the Sweden will work on counting the votes. Tyrant Rutella says, Swede speaks, there is some static from your mic. Oh, is it? I didn't know that. Okay, the sound is also a bit low. I'll move closer to the screen and see what happens. Carol versus connection problems. Yeah, I guess I might need a faster connection. I can't solve that tonight either. Sorry about that. Well, there are 23 people in here. Carol versus, I think it's the connection. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Although I don't really know what to do about it right now. So I don't know if it would help for me to invest in a new microphone. If